So yes, Tony Zona, Chief Data Officer at Thornton. Been at the firm 24 years. Started as a tax trainee and evolved into project roles, projects, processes, data. And about 8 years ago, there was an opportunity to take on the role leading what was the BI team. So I'm not techie, I'm a business person. I've come at data from a business angle. And that BI team has evolved into the data office that we've got now. And I've officially been Chief Data Officer for a year. So by all accounts, I've got about 6 months left. People often ask me how I've ended up doing what I do. And the reason I come back to language a lot is that my parents are both deaf, and you may have guessed from my name, my family are of Italian origin. So I have spent pretty much my whole life being a translator of some sort and now I find myself being the translator essentially between the technical people and the business people. So just bear with me while I just go through a very brief history lesson. So many of you may be aware that Italy as a nation was unified relatively recently, in the last 150 years. As such, there are hundreds of dialects, words, languages used across the country. And this is just an example of some of the differences. Each region, each province, each municipality, get that word right, all have variations on words. And if you've been there, some parts of Italy don't understand the actual dialects in other parts. You take the region of Campania, where Naples is the capital, where my father's from. That Neapolitan accent is so strong that television programs, people struggle to understand it. Anyone that's seen Gomorrah, it's a program on Sky, it's shown with Italian subtitles in Italy. That's how strong the dialect is. Historically, children would grow up in Italy speaking the local dialect first, and then they learn Italian at school. Quick example, the word chair. Apparently there's at least 14 different ways of saying the word chair across the country in the different dialects. I'm sure with the local village variations, there are a hell of a lot more. The origins, Latin, Spanish, German, French, all around, all comes from that unification piece. The other example is just this phrase, better an egg today than a hen tomorrow. And just some of the different dialects there and how different the words are. You can see some similarities. You might get some of the French, you might see some of the Italian, German in there, but you can see how different. Just don't ask me to pronounce any of them. So real Italian, pure Italian, as some people call it, is essentially the unifying language. You can see where I'm going with this. So I started to consider this in relation to our organisation. And those of you that were at Denholm's presentation earlier on, Thornton, professional partnership, business advisors, accountants, tax advisors, and we're set up as an organisation of business units, operating units, departments, teams. Very much like the regions, provinces, municipalities, villages in Italy. Each one of those teams all feels like they speak a different language, essentially a different dialect. And being a Chief Data Officer, and Denholm described it as 350 different P&Ls, that's exactly the challenge we've got. They're all speaking a different language. They've all got their own requirements around processes, how they want to measure things, how they want to track things. There's a lack of common understanding with most because they're all just speaking their own dialects. Individuals join teams, and they'll join and learn the dialect, the language of the team that they join. And then the business wonders why we can't then join up and track, measure as they wish. Simple questions like how many people do we have, how many clients do we have? I'm going to a very basic level. The true answer there, it depends. Depends on how we define our people and how we define clients. Do we mean individuals? Do we mean FTEs for people, do we mean bums on seats, are we including part-time, do we mean contractors, all of that. You would be surprised how many different variations there are. And the key is to get that unifying language across the business. And just to go back to the Italian example, over the last 20 years, there are, the children are very much now brought up to learn, I've noticed, going back, to learn Italian first. And then the dialect, it's almost frowned, the dialects are more frowned upon, sort of dying out, because it gives the children advantages to move, to progress their careers, to benefit themselves and the country going forward. So the key is that unifying language being first. So as data leaders, I haven't really told you anything you don't already know. There's a need for a common language. How do you ensure that universal view? How do you make sure that you can benefit from processes, how you can make those comparisons, how you can track progress? In our organisation, the key measures around utilisation, profitability, industries and sector performance. The number of times I've been asked to measure and track industries and sectors, it's like, we can, but you need to agree on this single definition of industry and sector, because your list and your list and your list are all different. So which one are we going to track? And back to the presentation earlier on, everyone assumes as a chief data officer, you own the data. I can make the recommendation, but in a firm of hundreds of business owners who have all paid to invest in the organisation, my role is a role of influence, and that can only go so far. One thing to mention is the conversations around data are improving. That's key. When I first put together our data strategy, the initial one 5 years ago, data governance, I got strange looks when I mentioned the words data governance, that's for sure. The struggle in this industry is avoid jargon, definitely. People focus on what's in it for them, talk their language where you can. Find analogies that resonate with leadership, whether that's dialects, whether that's pizza. I love a good pizzeria analogy. But find a way to speak the business's language. Focus also on the how. So how are we going to do this without that unifying language? How are we going to leverage AI? AI is probably the best topic to use at the moment, because everyone wants to talk about it. Leadership walking up saying things like, what are we doing about AI? Because they've heard it, because they've been to a session, you can turn around and say, well, you know, all that data governance work that we've been doing for the last few years, that will give you some true AI, rather than buying something off the shelf that you're going to point at all this data that you think you've got, and then complain why there's hallucinations in the AI, or the output's not quite right. When it comes to speaking a business's language, one controversial point I will make is that business leaders don't generally understand data. Not in the same way, and I can only speak from my own experience, that they understand finance. So I think as data leaders, to me, my personal opinion, data and finance in this day and age are absolutely at the same level. A business leader doesn't see it that way. Take the difference, if I approached my COO to talk about, say, a new credit control system or a new purchase ledger system, compare that conversation to, we need to invest in a data governance solution or data literacy, or, God forbid, data lakehouse migration. Just the understanding is completely different. So there's greater justification needed still to get that point across. So how? I will say this isn't an exhaustive list. It's not a silver bullet. I'm not going to give you all the answers today. But some of the how around the data, there'll be nothing there that you haven't already seen, but there's just some points that I did want to touch on. Governance. The reason I put governance at the top is because I was challenged recently around, is this just more governance? It's not more governance. It's just governance. It's just what you need in this day and age. I would say to thrive, but it's actually just to survive. We need data governance. There's the whole data office piece that we can use to almost demonstrate to the business that we can take on that responsibility. And when I say data office, there's different organisations have data offices that include different points, whether that's governance, whether that's data protection, architecture, insights, research. Some have CRMs. And there's obviously all the tools around data dictionary, glossary, how we manage that, ultimately, that consistent language. Just to be clear, to go back to the analogy, I'm clear, I will not ever be able to get rid of the dialects in the organisation. Anyone that tries to rid any organisation like the one I'm in of dialects is on a hiding to nothing. The key is, how do we ensure there's some commonality to have a central language that people can continue to speak their dialects in their teams, but it all references back to the central solution. And before any system or software can do that, effectively, you need the strategy, you need the buy-in. And lots of the conversations continue to be, and people I speak to continue to be at the receiving, understanding stage. And as data leaders, it's key on us to take the business on the journey to get to the feedback stage. I want the business to be challenging back with an understanding on the data conversations, the whole data digital strategies. I say strategies because we have a digital strategy and a data strategy that are completely aligned. Depends on your definition of digital and data, but they're also aligned to the business strategy as well. The danger is, as I mentioned earlier, some of the technical jargon around in the industry. I went to Big Data London earlier in the year. I'd had a long day. Someone stopped me to try and sell me their semantic data layer. And I said to them, that's great. Tell me how I should, as a CDO, go to my COO, who we're pretty much at the limits of what the investment in the team, and it's been great, and they're really supportive. How do I explain to a non-data person how I invest in a semantic data layer on top of the data governance investments and the data architecture and everything else? And the answer I got was, the solution sells itself. That's the challenge. So what can also help is a focus on the why. I mentioned AI. AI is the easiest. It's the easiest topic because it's the one that everyone's talking about. And every time someone mentions AI, I use it to talk about data governance. And the reason I talk about data governance first is, to me, it's the data governance, that data management, that drives everything else. Without it, it's the whole garbage in, garbage out. Anytime someone mentions AI to me, I take it back to data governance in the business. And I get no one really wants to talk about data governance. I joke about it with the team. So we try and make it as exciting as we can. New products and solutions, that helps from a commerciality perspective. You've got people that want to talk about ultimately profitability. How can we use the data to develop new products and solutions? Delivering operational efficiencies, mitigating risk. Obviously, that's helping save on costs. Driving better decision making, a term that I read yesterday, the weekend, was to avoid the hippos. Anyone? No? You saw that?
Highest paid person in the room, isn't it?
Yeah, highest paid person's opinion. So using the data, using the analysis to avoid the highest paid person's opinion, or at least have the data and the backing to challenge the highest paid person's opinion, I think is another why. Improving performance and obviously competitive advantage. The alternative is to focus on the risk of not having common language, whether that's confusion, inefficiencies, errors. As I mentioned, the key is talk the language of your business, talk the language of leadership. The lady that was here at the beginning of the day was the data lead at the police, and she said, the key that she said to me that resonated was, we're not there to make money, we're there to save lives. If she went to ask for investment, saying, well, this is going to make X millions, it's going to get nowhere. So find the language your business and the teams in your business speak. And that is a challenge with all the technical jargon that is around in the industry. I think there's also a realisation, for me, us as data leaders, that we do speak a different language to the business. So it's on us to find a way to translate those benefits, translate the why, and galvanise the organisation to buy into that common language. You need their buy-in. They're the data owners, ultimately. The key is how we galvanise the organisation. And to be clear, if you don't do it, your competitors will, whether that's an existing competitor or a new one that isn't around yet. Thank you.